Languages through music. Languages through music. Languages through music. Languages through music.
Greetings and welcome to the Languages Through Music podcast, and I'm super excited to be able to welcome activist, educator, dancer, poet, musician, Ra with me here today. Thank you so much for joining me, Ra. Welcome to the podcast.
So, gracias for the invitation.
I would love to hear your introduction in Taíno, if you wouldn't mind, before I start asking a million questions.
Yeah. Daile Ra, Tatrahaba Taíno-Borikua Ikurupugua Kenatekina, Taíno Hebeyono Dovaria Boriken. Alu Macau. So my name is Ra. I am a Taíno-Borikua artist and educator. My Taíno ancestors are from the island of Boriken, also known as Puerto Rico, and I live here in Boriken in the town of Macau.
Amazing. Thank you so much. How do I say thank you in Taíno to start with?
You can say hahom.
Hahom.
Or you can say arikomabu, but hahom is, I think, easier.
Hahom or arikomabu?
Bu.
Arikomabu.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
that
right.
one's a little bit harder for folks to say, but it just takes a little practice.
Hahom, both beautiful. So, Ra, you do so many things, between activism to entrepreneurship to dance, poetry, teaching, your online classes. What came first? What for you came first?
I think what came first for me was probably dance, because, it was something that I did as a little kid before I knew how to write or how to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom, she loved to dance, and that was just something that was practiced at home, dancing while cleaning, dancing while cooking, dancing while parties, dancing, like whatever. And so dance has been with me for a long time. And then as I became a teenager, I got more into it, and then in my 20s I started teaching, and so it's been like, I think I would say, in terms of like artistic expression, that was probably the first thing that I practiced. Yeah.
And to a particular style of music or mixed?
Yes, that's a good question. So at home we would dance to, we're from the Caribbean, right? And I was growing up between the Caribbean and also New York City, Lenapehoking, which is its indigenous name, Lenapehoking or NYC. So between Boriken and Lenapehoking. My mom would play a lot of salsa, a lot of merengue, bachata. But when I was really little, she put me in bomba classes, and bomba is an Afro-Indigenous style of music and dance from Boriken, specifically from here. And so it's very common that here that you'll learn it a little bit in school, to presentations or workshops that they do, or maybe your parents put you in a class so that you can be part of some school recital, and it's just kind of like, it's just in everything in some way. My mom put me in classes when I was really little, and so I think that was like the first formal dance training that I received was bomba. And then there's another style of music here that is known as plena, which is also Afro-Indigenous. And so, but plena doesn't really have so much of a dance style attached to it. I mean, there is some dancing, but it's mostly just a song and dance, the musical aspect. But, I think folks, POC folks dance to everything. So I would say bomba and salsa were like really present. And then later on, like reggaeton. As things started to modernize, and my mom loved reggaeton, so that was also played at home. And I still listen to I listen to Bad Bunny, Young Miko, all those artists. Yeah.
I remember from the first time we spoke, you said that you had the privilege of really growing up speaking Taíno. Your mom spoke it at home. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. So, Taíno is something, as a language, survived in pieces within the Spanish, the Caribbean Spanish that we speak. So, when I say that Taíno, declined, but did not stop being spoken, that's a political statement I make to help more our own people understand that it's always been present in our language. So in the names of foods, in the name of animals, in the names of trees and towns throughout the Caribbean. So we can't say a language, based on the criteria of like when a language is dying, when a language is dead. It doesn't necessarily mean that no one's speaking it. It just means that it's, like when language is endangered, that means that it only has a few hundred speakers, but there are still people speaking it, right? So when I say like Taíno survived through these ways, through the mix of Spanish that we speak that has African influence, European influence, indigenous influence. So I was privileged that my mom taught me this consciousness, and I took that with me. And so then when I started doing intentional work within Taíno language and working with language with the Hiwatahia-Taíno language team, which is a language team that was born out of the enrolled tribal organization that I'm part of, Higuayagua. I had that background, that kind of consciousness of like, we are revitalizing, we are reconstructing, we are reclaiming something that has been there in pieces. And granted, that is not the perspective that everyone takes. There are folks who say, well, this language is in pieces. We don't have everything, thus it is dead. That is their perspective. And I think they have a right to that perspective. But that's not my perspective. I think that if you claim that because something is not pure, then it is no longer alive, then that gets complicated. That's a very charged political statement, because then what does that say about us as mixed people? Then it goes into that conversation of we are not enough. I'm not enough of this. I'm not enough of this. I'm not enough of that. So like, where do I land? And I believe that you are enough of everything. That there's no such thing as purity. That everything is constantly being influenced by other things, and that in order for us to be in the present and survive, we have to allow ourselves to be influenced and to bear witness to other cultures and other peoples. And it's just a natural state of human life. So I know I took a long road to answer your question, but
no, 100%. And you actually made me think of a book I read recently called Language City. It's by Ross Perlin, and he's the co-director of an organization called Endangered Language Alliance, and they are based in New York. And a lot of the work is around that, finding these last speakers of the language in New York, and teaming up with people in the original lands, and just creating materials, creating archives, singing songs, WhatsApp voice notes, like you say, revitalizing. So how have you been, besides your classes that you run online, how have you been revitalizing Taíno in your community? I'd love to know.
So it's a tall order, and I think that there's so much work that we do, and there's so much work that's left to be done. And for me, I take a lot of inspiration from watching other indigenous language revitalization or reclamation initiatives and programs around the world. So I look a lot to what's happening in Aotearoa with the Maori. What's happening in Hawaii, what's happening with the Wampanoag, and the kind of work that they're doing within language. Ojibwe, the Wampanoag. They are one of the tribes of, I believe, Massachusetts. Okay. Which is in the States, a state in the United States, or the so-called United States, which is also known by indigenous people as Turtle Island. So yeah, looking to all these different language initiatives. I have friends who are Mayan from the Yucatec or the Yucatan Peninsula, and so looking to see what they're doing, because something that I've learned throughout these years is that the struggles that other communities have are they going to be the same that we have, in a lot of ways, and it always comes down to funding. It always comes down to resources, assets, funding to roll out programs. I mean, the issue is never ideas or creativity. The issue is always like, how do we make this happen? How do we get this out to more people? How do we get more people involved? How do we train teachers so that so it's not just me and it's not just you, so that we have how do we bring this into schools? How do we bring this into the communities? How do we educate people? How do we do advocacy work? Because all of these things have to be, there has to be funding so we can compensate people, because we're asking them to do a lot of work and they cannot just stop their lives. It's not sustainable for us to do things for free, because we always, as we were just talking right before this, there's still real life happening. We still have bills. We still have responsibilities. We still have families to take care of, ourselves, car, this and that. We're living in society. And so this has to be something that is funded. And there is a consciousness building that this is something that the government should be helping us with, because if you broke it, you got to fix it, right? It was, it's that same thing. Like, this was all you. So now you have to, it's reparations, right? And reparations are owed to so many communities around the world, Indigenous, Black, Asian, Arab. There's so much that needs to be fixed and that needs to be healed. And so to answer your question about what are the different things, so besides offering Taíno language classes virtually, I'm part of the Hiwatahia-Taíno language team. As I mentioned before, this is a language team that lives underneath the organization, the Taíno organization known as Higuayagua, which in itself function as a what we call a yukayeke, and in Taíno language, that's it's a community, it's a tribe, but nonetheless, the general Taíno tribe, there's just different Taíno organizations and groups that are doing different kinds of work, which is really important, because everyone's bringing something different to the table, right? And so besides the language classes, we have a dictionary that people can purchase. I personally also make music in the Taíno language.
I just discovered your music recently. It's amazing.
Thank you. So yeah, I make that, and that's on Spotify, and iTunes, and other streaming platforms. I have videos on YouTube. I make T-shirts that have Taíno language on them, and gear, stuff like that. And I'm not the only one. So I think that everyone who's involved in Taíno language efforts is bringing something unique to the table and is pushing the message forward. I have a friend, her name is Priscila Colon. She has an organization called Casa Areto, and they do a lot of work around Taíno language reclamation. In fact, she was the main organizer for the Taíno conference, which happened here in Boriken last summer, and that was a really big deal. A lot of people came through, a lot of people from different parts of the island, but also outside of the island. And so that was one of the first times that something like that had been done. And because there's a lot of
Taíno people are spread over several islands.
Yes, so our homelands extend from what we know, what we call now as Cuba, which is a Taíno word, Aitiquisqueya, which is modern day Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Boriken, which is known as Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the region of the Bahamas, and even the very south of Florida. So it's a big region, and so what's unique about sort of our situation is that there's a lot of people that we need to reach. There's a lot of people in different places, and their realities are all different. All the different governments in those places are different, and so people's struggles are different, and so there's a lot to take into account, and people's accessibility. But we try, right? So we have students right now who are Haitian, who speak Creole, and so they're learning Taíno language, and the hope is that they can then bring that into their community. in the ways that the community needs it, because I don't. I speak Spanish, I speak Boricua Spanish, so I can work in this community, but maybe my students can then take it to their friends and their families and their communities, right? We have folks who are Jamaican, so maybe at home they speak patois with their family, and so they're taking the Taíno language and making it so that they can teach it to their friends and family and their community. So yeah, there's a lot of ground to cover is the theme of this.
Yeah, it's so amazing. Like, I think it's really interesting about how, it being on the government to be helping these initiatives as well, and how a lot of them are. I mean, even in the UK, English has been such a dominant language, like all over. But even in the UK, like, I've had people writing to me on Instagram, like, do you have any materials for learning Irish or Gaelic, or like the kind of older languages of the UK? And it's, you would think that
the indigenous languages of the lands,
and it's really hard to find. I've had several people asking me for Welsh and for Irish, and like, English has done so much erasure of so many languages. And it's really the liberation of the languages tied up with liberation of people, with the governments admitting things, the histories that they've glossed over or straight up changed. And it's still a shock to me that Barbados is like the only former British colony that threw off the kind of UK royal family. Like, 3 years ago? Mia Mottley. I love Mia Mottley. She's a hero. But when I think that the Queen, or now King Charles, is still official head of state in so many Caribbean islands, that just makes me want to scream. Like, it's just...
it feels like you're not in 2024, but it also goes to show that there's so much work to be done, and so much education, and so much consciousness to bring.
So please tell me about the very first Taíno Day of Resistance.
So our first annual Taíno Day of Resistance will be happening this year, October 12th, 2024. So folks might be thinking, oh, why October 12th? Well, October 12th is the date that Columbus arrived in the Caribbean. And so the first Native American tribe that Columbus came across were Taíno people. And because we were the first contact, that really did a number. Not to say that it didn't, that colonization obviously spread, and it did a number on everyone. And it did a number on indigenous people of what we, quote unquote, call the Americas, but that in itself is a problematic term because it comes from another colonizer, but also on African descendant peoples. And so there's a lot of people that look to this date. And I think that this is going to be something that really unites all these struggles, because colonization began in 1492, but it never ended. At least not for us. We're the oldest colony. Boriken is the oldest colony in the world. We went from being a colony of Spain, España, to then a colony in 1898 of the so-called United States. And so a lot of the things that we struggle with here, like basic living necessities and things like that, are a product of colonization. Not to mention climate change, that's a product of colonization. Health crisis, education crisis, that's all a product of colonization, not just for us, but around the world, right?
Sure.
And so Taíno Day of Resistance is about that first contact. And instead of celebrating, which is what unfortunately a lot of institutions do, because they're celebrating white supremacy, colonization, genocide, slavery, Taíno Day of Resistance seeks to counter that with celebrating the resistance and the resilience of indigenous people, but also in solidarity with Afro-descendant peoples here. And also because when we're talking about indigenous people, we're also talking about Afro-indigenous people here. And so it's about bringing all that together, because when we're talking about Taíno people in 2024, we're not saying people who are pure Taíno. That doesn't exist. When we say Taíno, we're talking of a population that's majority Afro-Indigenous. And so it's important to bring all these struggles together. And so this will be something that we will be observing not just here in Boriken, but also in Quisqueya, in New York, and other places. We're hoping that other people will sort of include themselves and say, hey, I want to organize something in my city. I want to organize something in my town. And that can look a lot of different ways.
How can they get involved? How can they link up with the other organizations?
Folks can write to me on Instagram. My IG is Ruiz León. I also have another IG account, which is Wuru Taíno, which is WURU, and then Taíno is TAINO, Wuru Taíno. And Wuru Taíno is a grassroots initiative that my partner and I have started. It's actually, the name is Wuru Taíno Tekiro'uo, which translates to sort of like Proud Taíno Institute or Proud Taíno School. And the goal of this grassroots initiative is to take all the work that we've been doing, and now it lives underneath this. And so it's a way to promote and celebrate Taíno language and culture through presentations, gatherings, ceremonies, classes, workshops. And we have right now a youth internship that just ended last night. Actually, it was our final meeting, but we will we're taking a little break, and then they will come back and we will continue to work now, and we're going to step it up a notch and challenge them a little bit more. And so they're young people who we are helping to sharpen their leadership skills as hand in hand while they're learning Taíno language. So they've just completed their first their beginner 1 Taíno language class, and they worked on creative Taíno language projects. So one of them made a song, another one made a poem, and so the point is to help them get connected to their Taíno culture and identity, but also build those leadership skills, because one day I won't be here, my partner won't be here, we won't be here, but they will be. And so we need to foster that, nurture them, nurture their passion, their skills, their drive, so that they have the skills and the knowledge to then go out into the world and be leaders, because that's what we need. We need people who are doing awesome work out in the world, who are dismantling colonialism, racism, transphobia, all these things. And so that's Wuru Taíno Tekiro'uo. And so folks can reach out to us via any of these, either through Wuru Taíno page or my page, or via email, which is also just wurutaino@gmail. To say, hey, I want to organize something in my city. Can we have a conversation? And I can help facilitate that.
That's amazing. That is so inspiring. Really, I want to learn Taíno now. We're gonna open up some classes. I need to do this. And so with music, I mean, your music is amazing. Is there a large scene of music in Taíno, or was that also something like that you kind of had to create as you went along?
That's a good question. So there are not a lot of Taíno artists who are making music right now in Taíno language, but I think that's going to change.
I noticed more indigenous language artists now.
That's
Spanish and indigenous languages, or English, or I love that.
Yeah, that's something that's changing. So, but I take inspiration from Taíno artists who are my elders, who have been making music predominantly kind of bilingual, kind of like Taíno Spanish or Taíno English. I also know some Taíno artists who make just instrumental music. And so I took a lot of inspiration from them, and I take a lot of inspiration from them. So some artists like that I would like to mention are like my elder, my mentor, Irka Mateo. Irka Mateo, she has a Taíno organization called Sacred Taíno Healing, because she's also a medicine person. And so she offers ceremonies and healing sessions and workshops and things like that. But in terms of her music, you can find it on Spotify. She has videos on YouTube. So it's Irka Mateo. But she has a song called Taínos. And that song is bilingual. It's like Taíno and Spanish. And so that's one of my favorite songs of hers. So I take inspiration from that. There's also this really awesome artist he's an elder in our community called Miguel Sage. Miguel Sage has been making music for a long time. I have a friend whose name is Bo Arani, also has an album on Spotify where he's mixing Taíno and Spanish. I think the difference between like their music is my music is their music is more traditional, as a more traditional sound using traditional instruments, where I decided to go the more urban reggaeton, hip hop style pop. And that was on purpose. That's because I'm trying to reach a certain generation, a certain demographic, because they got that covered. So I'm going a different route, so that we're all playing different roles, but the goal is always the same. So yeah, that's a little bit. I don't know if I answered your question.
I mean that there are artists that have inspired you, but you are taking it in a new direction. And how long have you been making music? Did that come along with poetry or after poetry? Or
so poetry was first. I started out when I was like a teen. I started writing poetry, and then I had a friend in high school who was teaching himself guitar, and he really liked rock music, also Boricua, Taíno. And he and I, as you do when you're like emo, like teenager, you're like, oh, we should start a band. So we had a little band. I mean, we just like I think we recorded like 2 songs, which will never see the light of day, because I'm like, oh my God, please never. Like, I told him, like, don't ever put that anywhere. But we just made some songs, and then life happened, and we kind of went separate ways, and work and school and all this different stuff. And then a few years ago, we reconnected, and I was making music on my own, like with just like some apps. And I was like, I spoke with him, and he was like, oh, I'm down. Like, yeah, let's do this. Amazing. And so I wrote this song, and I was like, here's what I want it to sound like. Here's the beats. And he was like, I got you. Like, let's do this again. So it felt like we were picking up where we left off when we were like 16.
Wow.
And so we started making music. He has a little recording studio in the Bronx, in Lenapehoken in NYC. And so I was there, and I went to visit him, and we recorded. We like sat down for several hours and recorded our first song. And then we did so again with the second song. And it just has been like that. And now that I'm back home here, we send each other files, and I'll say, like, here's my voice, and he puts it to music, and he fixes it. He went to school for mixing and mastering. He's a music engineer, and so he knows what he's doing. So I'm like, here, I don't know, I just know how to record this on my phone here, like, or on my, on my computer. And so, so that's how it's been. That's how it's been working out. And I'm actually going to be performing at the Indigenous.
Next question.
Yes, go ahead.
Live.
So I'm going to be performing at the Indigenous Peoples Day event in Philadelphia on October 14 of this year, 2024. And so I'm really excited about that, because now that we do a lot of things virtual, there are not a lot of opportunities to perform live. Not that I'm like an expert at it, by any means, but that's also cool. So I performed at the Taíno conference last summer, and so I'm excited to go to Philly to perform some songs. And I'm also going to be leading a language workshop for children, and I will have a booth with some like things for sale, Taíno language things. So August
9th is it UNESCO or UN, the World's Indigenous Peoples Day? Is that something that you mark as well?
Yeah, I do a lot of I try to do a lot of social media content. So even if I can't host or organize something in person, I try to create sort of education around it. So like for Indigenous Peoples Day, or the world, or like a Mother Language Day. I released a poem that was all in Taíno. And I think that, the cool thing with this piece of technology that we have now, like cameras and audio, and that we can see each other like this, and that we can post things, like platforms like Instagram and Facebook can be tools for activism, tools for community organizing, if we choose to use them that way, right? It's all about how we choose to use them. So I try to use my platforms to, when during those days, to use it as an opportunity to post Taíno language things, or things that are happening in the Caribbean. So I'm sure that you'll see a post about that.
Languages to music.